Welcome again to today's episode of Searching the Heart. We're going to start with another topic I believe is necessary since we started briefly touching on it and in the context of the Gamble theory, and we didn't really go deep into it, but it's necessary to continue to talk about Nigeria. Okay, Nigeria is where I live in, of course. I have to be concerned about it. In the context of the world, no country in the world is not important, as we live in a global village. We always have, and whatever happens in one country may be a result of what is happening elsewhere, and will also affect what happens elsewhere. And so it's important to talk about Nigeria at this point, because especially in this program we have started talking about certain things concerning Nigeria, and want to now ask the question, what is happening in Nigeria now? And for me, the concern is, who are the people? There is a background to this, and this background started during the Abacha regime, just after Babangida tried to initiate a transition program to civil rule in response to the pressure of the international community for Nigeria to become a democratic nation. He began that process, and during that process there arose an agitation about restructuring Nigeria to actually reflect the desires of the people themselves, seeing as Nigeria had just come out of colonization. Of course, I talked about this last in the three previous episodes. The desire of a group of Nigerians, maybe not all Nigerians, but a group of Nigerians, to return to the pre-1914 situation. Of course, I was able to establish that the pre-1914 situation was not an ideal situation. Of course, there were wars were going on, including the jihad. Of course, there was a lot of slavery going on, slave raiding and the likes. But I'm sure this group of people were talking about the predominant culture, the different ethnic identities, and that these ethnic identities were not consulted during the constitutional making process. And this is the idea that resonated at that time, and that before Nigeria could become a true democracy, of course, all the ethnic nationalities must sit down together under a constitutional conference and discuss what next for Nigeria. And they insisted that that is what should have happened, instead of the referencing and the reenactment of the 1979 constitution, which later became the 1999 constitution, a little revamped. So this was the idea, and this was what took place during the Abacha regime. Of course, Abacha died, and a government came on board that hastened the process of democratization. And in that light, political parties were formed, and they contested for local government positions, state positions, and of course the president's legislative positions also. But one thing of concern that we must look at is the issue. Of course, I have already stated that the real thing in contention, who are the people? Are the people really participant in the process? Are they really recognized as the people of Nigeria? And this is what democracy is all about. And if that was not taken into consideration, those people felt that the whole process was flawed. And so, this though did not stop what happened from happening. And what happened was that even though the opposition was fighting Abacha, and they also continued to fight for the ideals that they believed in, some of them felt that the candidate that emerged as the presidential candidate and won the election in the person of Olusegun Obasanjo was also forced on them. And that was very rife. I remember that time. I was a young man then. I remember very clearly, a lot of them felt that this was also a kind of cooked up process, and that their agitations were not listened to. But the people came out, voted amid criticism, and a president came on board. And I remember saying that Obasanjo himself was one of the proponents of the idea that, look, the 1999 constitution was good enough and there was no need for any review. And that was one of the things he continued to fight throughout his presidency. In fact, it actually led to his desire to have a third term. In his view, to be real to the Nigeria we were living in, there needed to be a third term for presidents. I just heard that the bill for a one tenure of 6 years was rejected by the National Assembly. And of course, you know, those arguments have been going back and forth. From the agitation for third term, some feel that what is really needed is one term, maybe one 5-year term or one 6-year term. And of course, all these are all built on the idea that the people of Nigeria need to be consulted. And some feel, of course, to really consult the people of Nigeria, of course, we have to have representation within all the ethnic groups, and every ethnic group identity and philosophy must be represented in the presidency. Well, I have my own views on that, and to me that sounds rather childish than in any way nationalistic. If you say everybody must be president just because he is from that other ethnic group or that other ethnic group, it doesn't really sound right to me. That is at the expense of true development. Of course, that is my own view, but that is what has been happening. And of course, like I said, Obasanjo felt that rather than reduce the tenure, 3 terms was good enough for a president to really have impact. Of course, that was rejected. Okay, so this is what was going on at that time. The people wanted to be consulted as to their destiny, and this is what resulted in what we are having today. I'm going to look at this again in detail after this. Obasanjo did not succeed in his third term bid, and I remember a few videos back I talked about the result of that. He was instrumental in bringing in somebody he had mentored, somebody he believed in the person of Yaradua, and of course his vice, Goodluck Jonathan. Of course, Yaradua, we know Yaradua died after a few years in the presidential seat, and Goodluck Jonathan took over. Now, to show you the diversity of views and needs of the people of Nigeria, it is a very diverse group of people, about 400 different tribes and ethnic groupings, and every person, I mean, within those multiplicity of tribes and peoples has his own idea. Of course, we know generationally also there are differences in the views as to what should be done. Of course, the young people are coming up and they are being educated and they are learning from other places, and they also have their own views. So this is what the question still remains: who are the people of Nigeria? You know, while very, very necessary, that question may not have all the answers we think we want to hear. And this is what really happened in Nigeria, and is still happening here in Nigeria. Okay, so during these years, The opposition at that time realized that notwithstanding their struggle, they would have to work with others. And it's very important that notwithstanding their struggle, they will have to work with others to see this struggle through. And that necessitated compromise. Many of them were able to. I remember that time, Chief Alex Ekweme, who was widely pitted as one of the best candidates, most experienced candidates to a civilian himself, who had served as vice president before, and one of the leaders of the political groups that had come up at that time, himself was put aside in favor of Obasanjo, and he had to compromise. He was one of the few politicians that refused to go renegade, but had to compromise because of the situation at that time. And so Obasanjo led, and after him, of course, with Goodluck Jonathan. And one of the compromises that also came on stream was Buhari himself, the recent past president of Nigeria, General Buhari, the former General Buhari that became the new president of Nigeria after Goodluck Jonathan. He was another compromise that these agitators or new breed politicians had to compromise with in order to see their dream of Nigeria come to pass, because Nigeria was far bigger than just a few group of people, or a group of people, no matter how educated they were. Okay, so this is the issue at stake. Remember that Nigeria, at that time of the agitation for restructuring, of course it was called the restructuring agenda, okay, and also the clamor for a constitutional conference. Many conferences were promulgated, and even people were elected to serve as representatives of their people in those conferences. But at the end, the reports brought forth by those conferences were mostly put aside in favor of larger compromises. Okay, so this is what happened at that time. Okay, so Buhari came into government as one of those compromises. Okay, but we can say very confidently that at this point, the Tinubu presidency is an actualization of some of those pressure groups that insisted that Nigeria must reflect the true identity of its people and the true agitations of its different tribes and nations. Okay, so that group is in power right now, represented by the president of Nigeria himself, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Okay, but many of them, of course, like the leaders of the Afenifere, like Bola Ige, of course, Adisaya, were some of the casualties that were lost within that struggle. Many ideas and rumors as to what really happened, but we know that they were some of the key figures within that struggle. So, what is really happening in Nigeria? It is important to really find out what is happening in Nigeria. We will go a little deeper into this again after this break. Of course, we talked about some of the casualties of that period of renaissance, okay? And of course, we have not even mentioned MKO Abiola himself. That was the key reason for some of those agitators, okay? He was one of the reasons for some of those agitations because of the annulment of his election as president of Nigeria during the Babangida regime, and also the agitations of the Niger Delta people who wanted more resource control. Okay, so many of those agitations were going on, and of course that is why the call for restructuring at that time. Okay, but like I said, the present government does represent some of those agitations and those needs, having had to compromise with the larger Nigeria, with the larger needs of the people, for the sake of peace and for the sake of continuity. And this was largely facilitated during the Obasanjo administration, who himself was denied a third term, feeling that would have probably represented more of the pre-colonial Nigeria, as hilarious or funny to some as it might seem. But this is what we are seeing today in Nigeria today. Believe it or not, we are seeing semblances of what Obasanjo warned about in Nigeria today. He felt that Nigeria would disintegrate as a result of granting some of those agitations. And of course, what we are experiencing today is, to my mind, a new renaissance. A new renaissance. And how did this come about? In order to compromise with the restructuring clamors of the powerful group of Nigerians who had a legitimate claim, Obasanjo began a process through Goodluck Jonathan of the constitutional confab. Of course, he put Goodluck Jonathan in place, and Goodluck Jonathan, being, of course, a representative of his own very powerful constituency, which was Niger Delta, began the process of the constitutional confab. Okay? During the period, the government began to put in place policies that were tailored to deliberately please the group of politicians I'm talking about. Okay? And what did he put in place? Now, this is not very, not completely from that group of politicians, but looking at the greater Nigeria, or the clamors existing at that time, that also existed pre-Obasanjo, pre the Obasanjo regime, and I have made a video on this one. One of those clamors was the continuation of subsidy. Okay? It was very clear during Goodluck Jonathan that even though he was advised against that position, he continued the subsidy regime as part of bowing to the clamors of particular groups of people. Okay, the promotion of locally contrived politics and politicians. Of course, this was a brainchild of Obasanjo himself, that insisted that politics must not be from the top down. That means somebody who has not really assimilated within his own people, has not been accepted within his own people, maybe has made money overseas or in the just largely in the urban area, cannot just come and present himself as a candidate. He has to go through the local government political structure. And that was his own view. Of course, it was accepted by some, rejected by some, but this is what he tried to put in place: locally contrived politics. Okay, it wasn't, of course, implementable to a large extent, but it was rushed into place, and many politicians found themselves, new breed politicians found themselves, in politics after, especially after Obasanjo handed over to the new government. These new breed politicians were able to come in as a result of locally contrived politics. Okay. Thirdly, this was not really a deliberate policy of government, but in some areas, yes, it was deliberate. Like when Obasanjo tried to ban the broadcasting of miracles on TV, there was a deliberate downplaying of non-indigenous religions. Okay, a deliberate downplaying of non-indigenous. It was not, like I said, it was not a very clear policy of government, but it was a direction that the government went. And this is what is resulting in what we see today: downplaying of non-indigenous religions. Remember, the clamor is to return to the pre-colonial status quo, representing the views and the wishes of the Nigerian people. So this was necessary because of that. But this was not enough, and of course, riding on the back of the restructuring movement and insurgency, like I tried to point out in my video on leadership, the insurgency began. Okay, riding on the back of restructuring, the insurgency began. There was a subtle feeling that the insurgency was allowed by the influential leaders in Nigeria, seen as part of a larger debate. You know, it started all of a sudden, of course. Many Nigerians did not expect the insurgency. We had just dealt with the Niger Delta problem. Okay, there was a lot of insurgency even in the Niger Delta at that time, and it had been solved by giving the people a stake, even bringing in Goodluck Jonathan, who became president of Nigeria. But then a counter-insurgency began up north. At that time, of course, solid minerals have been discovered, you know, and even oil in some parts, and there began an insurgency. Okay, and it was a feeling that politicians had taken advantage of that situation, some of the disagreements that came out of that situation, to allow an insurgency. And this was seen as a greater part of the debate. Okay, we started noticing some things that were happening. Of course, one of the very, very important flashpoints, of which we'll still hear about today, is the Patience Jonathan situation. Okay, when she invited a group of people to come and to question them about the kidnapping of the Chibok girls, she was shocked. She couldn't get the answer she wanted, and she cried out. She cried out, "There is God, there is God," because she was shocked at what she saw. So there was that idea, that feeling, that certain leaders in Nigeria were complicit in the insurgency. I will continue to talk about this after this.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with 2 insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, and the 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
Yes, unfortunately, the insurgency began. Obasanjo's warning was coming to fruition right before our eyes. Although, like I pointed out, he was also a victim in the whole thing, because his own actions may have paved the way for some of those things. You know what I believe is that what he needed to do was to either go, completely on the side of Western democracy, or completely on the side of Africanization. And Africanization is all about sociology, not capitalism. Socialism, not capitalism. Okay? And Africanization meant maybe a third-term agenda. Africanization meant for people like me who had assessed the situation, maybe rather a parliamentary system of government like the pre-Civil War situation, rather than a presidential system of government. Okay, so this is what it meant. Africanization meant all that, but of course the complex nature of Nigeria made sure that these things were not really accomplishable. And of course, Obasanjo was forced to hand over to a government that was weaker than he was. And of course, the insurgency began. So this is the result of what we saw happening. And what were the results on the people of Nigeria themselves? This is what I noticed personally. My own research and experiences revealed to me. a deliberate systematic isolation of particular groups of peoples for whatever reason. For whatever reason it was, a deliberate isolation of particular groups of people. Now, in every government and every system, there is no way that leadership can have its eyes on everything. And I'm not talking about that, okay? Of course, there are people who may not directly be impacted by the policies of government, have to go the extra mile to just, survive and to make it in life in every government. And this was actually rife, okay? There was that idea that, look, there's always somebody left behind. But what was noticeable was totally different, okay? Deliberate concoction of lies in order to alienate groups of people. And this is when you go on the streets. It is not something you notice, not a political thing, okay? It is based on the like I tried to mention, the pre-colonial status quo in Africa. And what was the pre-colonial status quo in Africa? Slavery was going on, okay? The traditional leaders governed based on their access to spiritual power, and that is why I began this series of sermons, podcasts talking about necromancy. Necromancy was the ruling system on ground. It governed what the traditional leaders did. It governed what the feudal leaders did. The feudal leaders were trying to introduce a better system of government. Of course, the Damphodil Jihad was coming in, and of course later on the Christian missionaries came in. But the Christian missionaries were practically absent at that time, okay, except for anti-slave raiders who, like David Livingstone, and some of the Portuguese businessmen who also facilitated some of the slave trade. So this is the problem, okay? So this resulted, trying to go back to the pre-colonial status quo, brought back necromancy. And because of the return of necromancy, this facilitated the deliberate and systematic isolation of particular groups of people, okay, that were seen as not really relevant in the system that was in play, okay? So just to clarify that. And this also, of course, would mean economic isolation and social isolation, okay? Now, this was seen in everyday crisis that was going on. First of all, there were pockets of, apart from the larger insurgency that came from the northeast, okay, there were pockets of crisis here and there, inter-religious, inter-tribal conflicts here and there, and of course these affected the whole situation, and it's difficult to see what I'm talking about when these things were going on, okay? So of course there was economic isolation of peoples and groups, okay? And this was deliberately carried out through disinformation and economic sabotage. Disinformation and economic sabotage. I can personally tell you that I observed at that point, the influence of Russian, Russian sentiments, Russian activities within one other person, I remember on social media, pointed out that Russia is extending its influence. Of course, and we know Russia is good in disinformation. Of course, China was deep into Africa at that time, and most of us did not really anticipate that we would be in the Nigeria where we are in today. We thought that the Russians were going to take over, but of course Nigeria, because of the way it is, with a very, very massive diaspora in the United States and the Western world, of course it wasn't easy for Russia to take over. And like we thought it would, immediately Russia started the Ukraine war. And you see, all these things affect Nigeria directly. of course, a lot of Nigerians left Ukraine and came back to Nigeria because they were interested at play. So I want you to understand what is going on in Nigeria today is not just a local thing. It is an international problem. Okay, when the international powers clash, it affects us. And of course, the way what we are doing down here also, contributes to that situation. Okay, and of course, I'm going to talk more about this, but the truth is that the Western powers themselves, which I have mentioned in the last video, really did not have our well-being at heart, because Russia was trying to extend its influence. The Western powers were not really interested, okay, in what we were doing down here, and that is why, because of those agitations to return to the pre-colonial status quo. Okay, so this is the problem. The Western powers were not really interested in us. Of course, we know what happened next. Later on, Britain took a back step. Okay, they stepped away from the European Union. Okay, because Britain, Britain was our colonial master. Okay, so somehow something influenced Britain to step away from the European Union and began partnership with Nigeria again. Okay, maybe not fully, but kind of indirect partnership with Nigeria, and most of that was overseen during this period. But the problem is that the reason they were able to come in again was because of the status quo, and the status quo is that the Nigerian government was weaker. Okay, was not as strong as it was, and of course the Nigerian diaspora was playing a very, very important role in this. And so this is the issue that was going on: economic isolation of peoples and groups, the institution of disinformation and deliberate economic sabotage within the Nigerian state. Okay, and some of these people that were being alienated, strangely enough, were not the elite that has stolen from Nigeria. Okay, well, everybody knows who was accused anyway of stealing from Nigeria. Okay, the Babangida regime period, and some of the military generals that ruled during that period. Of course, the Abacha period. Abacha was taken to court. His family, after he died, his family was taken to court for a long period of time because of those things. Okay, but strangely enough, these were not the people that were on trial. But the people that were on trial were ordinary Nigerians, people who had never stolen from the people. Okay, these opened the door for the realization that the pre-colonial status quo had come back. Okay, these were issues that could only be explained through the eyes of pre-colonialism. I will continue with this after now. We will now start a short description on what really happened, just looking at what was happening on the streets. Okay, what really set the stage for what I just described: disinformation, economic sabotage, social and political alienation of minorities of people. Okay, people who are not based on tribal or ethnic stance or political affiliation, but just because of who they were. What set the stage? First of all, ordinary Nigerians wanted a piece of the pie. They were desperate for the piece of the pie. The numbers were too phenomenal. Okay? You will say Babangida owns companies overseas. These were the rumors that were going on. Okay, he owns that company, he owns this other company, he owns that other company in wherever it is, all over the world. Abacha, the figures that were said that Abacha took away, billions and billions and trillions. And when Obasanjo came in, he did not try to compensate for some people. He did not try to compensate Nigerians. He just continued with the status quo, for them. And so Nigerians were tired. They wanted a piece of the pie. Okay? And there was talk on the streets that each Nigerian should be given 1 million naira as compensation. In fact, this was real talk. It wasn't something, it's not a rumor. It was discussed every day in Nigeria. Okay, I remember being in the class and this was the topic. Okay, what if every Nigerian was given 1 million naira? Of course, in those days, 1 million naira was something. Okay, just about 20 years ago. Maybe about 15 years ago, 1 million naira was something. Okay, so if you give each Nigerian 1 million naira, I mean, it was going to solve the problem, and there were arguments for and against. Okay, as these things were going on, I mean, these discussions were going on during the Obasanjo regime, and of course, Nigeria was relatively stable at that time. Okay, was relatively stable at that time. But after then, as the insurgency set in, of course, the government began to look for ways to solve the immediate problems on ground, and it began a deliberate policy of heavy taxation of the middle class. Now, in the United States, they are talking about how to tax the rich, but of course, you know, Nigeria was a different country. Nigeria is being governed by the elite, clearly, and of course, being a third world country, you know, developing country, that would be the case. Okay, so if anybody was going to be taxed, it wouldn't be the elite; it would be the working class, the middle class. Okay, so it began a deliberate policy of heavy taxation of the middle class. And I know one of the reasons why this was the issue is because you could not tax the rich. Okay, they owned a lot of land, and of course, you know, if you increase the taxation on land, it will affect them directly. And so it was rumored that some of them actually sponsored some of the insurgency to avoid this taxation. Okay, they took advantage of the insurgency, you know, to create problems for governments, to avoid taxation. Okay, so heavy taxation, what was left was heavy taxation of the middle class. And of course, I can go on and on that. It created a sympathy for insurgency. And I've talked about this before. Okay, there was a muted sympathy for the insurgency because of people. Nigerians were still, you know, feeling that, look, they should benefit from, you know, the process of democracy. Okay, they should not be now the victims of their own government. Okay, of course, they talk of 1 million. And the recent thing, what began to happen, is the rampant, as discussed by the DWTV, which the video I posted yesterday. There began a rampant and unregulated mining without taxation as a reaction to these heavy taxation, to these what they felt were unfair tax policies. Rampant and unregulated mining without taxation. Okay, and of course, this has been going on for quite a number of years. I personally have interviewed 1 or 2 people involved in the mining industry, and they have confirmed this. Okay, they even go to the extent of saying we should not blame those Westerners who buy these things, because of course, what can they do? They need it, they will buy it. Okay, so it is a local problem as far as they were concerned. Of course, the DW documentary on that puts the blame on both sides. Of course, I agree with that, because I've also seen quite a few things as relates to that. We know what's happening in Niger right now. Okay, where a junta has taken over and he has chased away the French, of course, because of the same things, the solid minerals. Okay, so we have to put the blame on both sides, and this is what is affecting Nigeria. Okay, especially as we see the insurgency in the northeast and northwest. Okay, this is what is directly affecting Nigeria. And of course, we know that the insurgency made it difficult to monitor or curtail this state of affairs. Unregulated and rampant mining, and of course, the involvement of some government officials cannot be eliminated from the picture. Of course, this cannot go on without some of their involvement. Okay, and this is the issue. Now, the problem again, we come back to the problem of the outburst of Patience Jonathan. Her surprise at what was going on. She is just a normal Nigerian, and I agree with one commentator that said, look, this woman is just a normal Nigerian, and most of us do not know what is going on underneath. They don't know what is going on underneath, and she was shocked by what she saw, that people were involved in the people that were supposed to be patriots and people that love their country were involved in this thing, of course. But one thing that most of us like her did not know was that we were the supposed beneficiaries of the whole thing. Okay, Patience Jonathan is one of those normal Nigerians. Okay, I went through the normal Nigerian school system. Okay, speak our Nigerian English. You can really set us apart from a British citizen because our English is just so raw. So we are the normal Nigerians, and we were supposed to be the target of the supposed new emancipation, and this is the problem. And so Patience Jonathan was not a very good figure for to be crying out like that, because people like her were supposedly the beneficiaries of what was going on, of course, in the eyes of many Nigerians. So this is the problem. We will continue on with this after this one. Okay, away from Patience Jonathan, let's talk about those economic realities that were taking place. Okay, these mined resources were sold cheaply to foreign companies and are still being sold, I might add, to foreign companies. And proceeds went directly to the pockets of these ordinary Nigerians. Okay, these Nigerians that were supposed to be emancipated, and that is why the whole process was wrong. Okay, and what it did was actually put Nigerians in two camps: the educated, supposed beneficiaries of the period ability regimes. Okay, they were the educated ones, the beneficiaries of top government officials, spoke very good English, and the normal ordinary Nigerians that spoke bad English, were seen to be from the bush or from the rural areas. Okay, and of course grew up under such cultural mentoring systems that were popular then. Okay, so these processes, it went straight into their pockets instead of going through the taxation process. Okay, through of course the marketplaces, unregistered businesses, all that. There was no need for any documentation. Many people saw taxation as stealing. Even the legal taxation was for them stealing by government officials. And they preferred, the strange thing is that they preferred to give kickbacks, instead of being recorded as taxpayers. This was the strange thing, because many of these Nigerians were not really educated people, and even if they were, they despised the system that education brought. Okay, they believed that we should trust one another, and this was sometimes done under the auspices of religion. Okay, under the auspices of religion, say, okay, let's trust one another. I know in some situations where I went to buy land, and the man wanted me not to sign. He believed that we shouldn't sign any document. I should just put the money in his account. This is the popular feeling of Nigerians. Recently, I sold my car, and I couldn't believe it. When I came back, I was not in town, so I came back. I rushed signing the documents, and the guy was not there. He never called to say, hey, give me my documents, because a lot of Nigerians don't believe in documentation. Okay, they don't believe in the process, taxation. Okay, because some of them because of taxation, some of them just because they don't believe in that. They believe that religion says we should trust one another, and that is just what it is. Okay, so This is what we see, and every day the insurgency comes closer and closer and closer. Okay, and of course it is backed up by necromancy. Okay, and of course I have explained why necromancy is not a system that we should imbibe, because it is a dishonest system, and its aim is to destroy. Its aim is to destroy the economy, and this is what we see. So the alienation of this group of people from the economy, because they are educated, because they want to document everything, okay, is what we see, and it is deliberate. Okay, now these are the gory truths of what happened and is still happening in Nigeria. Okay, so what do we see? Very high exchange rate, dollar to naira exchange rate. I did a short survey of all the exchange rate of countries like Ghana, South Africa, even Zimbabwe, even Afghanistan, a war-torn country, and none of them is as bad as the situation we find in Nigeria. And the reason is because of these things I've been enumerated. Okay, and funny enough, you know, I was privileged to travel out to Dubai 2 years ago, and you know, it was shocking. I went there, and Nigerian music. We went on a boat cruise, and just a few of us were Nigerians on that cruise. Just a very few, a handful, and it was Nigerian music that was being played. Okay, now these are some of the things that were that was really, you know, closing the eyes, as it were, of a lot of Nigerians. You know, these were some of the sectors that were benefiting during the period. Okay, young people got to go out and to sell music, okay, outside the country. Okay, while others who did not have privileged parenthood, you know, or backgrounds, could not do that. Who did not have access to those people who could help them, you know, as it is all over the world. Of course, you know, there's nothing strange about that. Okay, but some of these few people and sectors were not doing bad during this period. Okay, and of course it started during the Obasanjo period, that everywhere, when everybody was, you know, participating. Well, supposedly everybody. So this is the issue. Okay, so when you go out there, Nigeria is not doing bad, you know, but when you have to really deliberately type out the figures, you know, go on the internet, you know, ask questions to see the numbers, and when some of the numbers don't necessarily even show it. It was later on, just before Buhari left government, that the numbers became clear, especially when the fuel subsidy was removed. Okay, unemployment went up, inflation went up, but of course we know that started right before, after his first tenure. Okay, so this is what was going on. Okay, so in the eyes of so many people, Nigeria was not doing bad, but those who were really watching, especially those it was affecting, we had the figures. Like me, I had the figures in my hand. I knew what was really going on. But when you go on the streets, everybody was laughing. Everybody was doing what he was doing. Okay, thinking that things were going on well, because these illicit funds were being funneled into, of course, the hands of the poor, as was the clamor, you know, of distributing 1 million naira. You know, so that was just the feelings, the felt needs of Nigerians. This is what was going on. Okay, but of course, negatively affected a lot of Nigerians. Okay, and this was seen in the health sector. Okay, the increase of debts. Okay, this was seen, of course, through the insurgency. There was a lot of kidnappings. Okay, and a lot of ransom paying, you know, and all these terrible things were happening. But some people actually chose to ignore these very glaring evidence of what was going on. Okay, so this is the thing. Now, I want to just round up with these two issues. What does this create, and what is this creating? One, it is the decimation. No, actually, these are possibilities. Okay, in a system that normally goes on like that, when there is recession and there is economic turmoil and crisis, two things could happen. And one of the things is that either the poor are decimated, okay, or the middle class is eliminated. Well, in Nigeria, because the politicians needed the poor to vote for them, of course the poor were more in number, they actually went to deliberately try to eliminate the middle class instead. And this is the issue. Of course, it is the poor that have the diggers and the shovels and go into the mines, of course. So they are the direct beneficiaries of this illicit trade. Okay. So what really began to happen was the elimination of the middle class. Okay. And the government actually, or perceived government, okay, because of course the government was getting weaker and a group of elite which were getting stronger, okay. So these perceived government, which were actually the elite, deliberately went on rampage to eliminate the middle class, okay. They did this by allowing the proliferation of fraudulent multinationals whose main customer base came from the comfortable middle class, okay? Fraudulent multinationals. And these fraudulent multinationals floated fake investment schemes. We know the recent clampdown on the crypto market, of course. They were able to meander out of that. There were a lot of fake investment schemes, okay? Some of those investment schemes were closed down. Some of them, because of political reasons, were closed down, okay? And one very important one was fake immigration sites, okay, that flooded Nigeria. The middle class felt threatened. Of course, they had educated their children, wanted to see them do well. They were afraid of the insurgency, and they began to send a lot of their children abroad. Okay, those of them who could pay the fees, the immigration fees. And so because of that, there were a lot of fake immigration sites. Okay. And by the instrumentality of the insurgency, many Nigerians were forced to participate in these fake schemes with the eye of helping one another. Okay. It soon deteriorated into open hostage taking. Okay. This was things we observed going on the streets. Okay. If you did not spend your money, you were seen as not part of the community and even threatened sometimes. So these are the things that the government should put its eyes on. Okay. Not what it looks like. I believe there's a lot of emphasis on what it looks like. In this situation, a lot of disinformation is going on. A lot of disinformation is going on. Okay. Sending government officials the opposite way. Sending even we, okay, another way, while what is going on is different. Okay. Duping of people online. Okay. And also in the open market place. I can remember in those days you go to the market, you buy something you know is genuine. But I can remember so many times, I can't count, sorry, that I had to return something that I had bought in the market within this period of time. Because people were literally forced, some forced to dupe one another, others encouraged it. Okay? Others encouraged it. It was also open knowledge that what Buhari wanted to implement was different from what he ended up doing because of this very situation. Okay? It was during the Buhari regime that the food prices skyrocketed. Of course, the removal of subsidy on agriculture. Okay? So what he wanted to implement was clearly not what he ended up implementing because of some of these things that were going on. And this is vis-a-vis a lot of disinformation. So when you are told something, you check it and you cross-check and you cross-check again. Okay? And that this was the deliberate elimination of a group of Nigerians through disinformation and economic slavery, with the cooperation of Western democracies, through the suppression of Christianity, suppression of liberal Islam, and the gradual enforcement of woke ideology. Okay, this was what was going on. I can personally testify to that, you know, because I'm always involved online, and I know how much the woke ideology from outside Nigeria is influencing some of these things that are going on. Of course, the woke ideology in the US is different from what is in Nigeria, of course. But you know, a lot of these people try to just transfer what is going on in America down into Nigeria. This was very rife, okay? And of course, it created a lot of problems. Like I talked about the attempt to emancipate a certain group of Nigerians, those who can't speak English, those who are poorly educated, okay? And that is some kind of woke ideology. Instead of allowing those who have been educated to lead the way, and these ones follow, you know, they try to eliminate the middle class, you know, and bring up those they felt were supposed to be disadvantaged. Okay, and this is creating what we are seeing today. Of course, created the massive exodus of the educated middle class out of the country, those who could pay their way. Of course, we know how expensive it is, and worse, of course, because of the deteriorating value of the naira. This happened. Okay, this is happening. Very few people can afford to pay their way, you know, out of the country. So we will talk about the proliferation of fraudulent multinationals, okay, who maintained, whose main customer base was, of course, the comfortable middle class, okay. They floated a lot of fake investment schemes and fake immigration sites, and of course, this was somehow deliberate, in my view, to mop up the resources from the hands of the middle class. Of course, because the poor were those people who could go to the mines and dig up these things, okay? And of course, they were those people who can vote. They are the ones that go out in mass to vote. And so there was a kind of deliberate policy to emancipate these ones while mopping up the cash in the hands of the middle class. Deliberate to remove the middle class, okay? And this is what went on. So by the instrumentality of the insurgency, many Nigerians were forced to participate in these fake schemes with the eye of helping one another. Okay, it soon deteriorated into open hostage taking. Okay, if you did not spend your money, and of course sometimes it's economic sense. Okay, the more the money is out there, the more the wheels of the economy are fueled, okay, are oiled, you know. So it sometimes makes economic sense, but at the same time, the more liquidity, the more the value of the naira falls, and this is what we are seeing, okay. So this is what is going on. So some Nigerians are even threatened; they must spend their money, okay, and this causes the removal of the middle class. And of course, there is a gap created between the elite, who mostly control sources of production, okay, and the poor. So there's that huge gap, and this is what we are seeing going on in Nigeria today. And we see the very deteriorating value of the naira, okay, and you know, while people outside see Nigeria as a very prosperous country, but the reality on ground is the figures don't lie, okay. The economy is really plummeting, is going down, and if something is not done fast, we are heading for disaster. Now I want to round up with a question: is there hope for Nigeria? For most of us who are here in Nigeria, we are seeing a very bleak future ahead, okay. So like I said, the only hope is that many people don't know what they are doing and the effects of what they are doing. Okay, when you educate them, when you tell them the truth, and they see the effects, of what they are doing, they tend to turn back. Like I said, Nigeria has gone through a lot of things, and vis-a-vis some of the corruption that was allowed during the military regimes, so many things have been done wrong. Education, some Nigerians feel that they have disdain for the educational system. They feel that they would rather succeed doing the wrong thing. And that is why they quickly embrace those ideologies that feel that we should go back to the pre-colonial situation. So but when you show them how it is better to succeed doing the right thing, following the legal system, they will now stand up and they will change their way and they will do the right thing. So this is what we see happening. Of course, I can't overemphasize the effort to turn the thing around and say, those are the ones are the wrong ones. There are a few bad eggs, and they created what we're in. But lumping everybody in the same box will not help. We must now begin to understand this is the right way to do things. Let's do it instead of two wrongs making a right. So I believe that there is hope if we can change people's minds towards doing the right thing, instead of just seeking the easy way, looking for shortcuts. I am David Dumjichinke for you today in Searching the Heart.
It's a long, long way back home. It's a dry and dusty path to where I belong. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear the trumpet, my heart rejoicing. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear you calling, my heart is breaking.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with 2 insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.